But I will warn you, there's some things that you're just going to have to say, you know what, this is another turning of the wheel. And this is not the books being filmed exactly. This is an adaptation.
Yeah. All right, stop. Hold up. I know immediately the reaction a lot of Wheel of Time fans had when they heard that. And it probably went something like this. We're all gonna die! I want to address those concerns and issues through an unbiased medium, unlike what some commenters think. No, I'm not bought and paid for by Amazon. I'm just a very optimistic fan. And there were some things Brandon said here that were kind of concerning, and I'm going to address those as well. But first and foremost, I would like to tackle this idea that we're not getting the Wheel of Time brought to the screen. We're getting a creator's interpretation of the Wheel of Time brought to the screen. And I think that's inevitably true for all fantasy adaptations. First of all, thank you, Matt, over at the Dusty Wheel, for letting me use this footage. If you guys haven't subscribed to the Dusty Wheel and you're a Wheel of Time fan, I can't imagine why. It's some of the best Wheel of Time content in the platform. Live streams, community engagement, Brandon Sanderson interviews, Michael Kramer and Kate Redding. The guy's killing it. So thank you, Matt. Hey, look, I'm you right now. Can we just... I am Matt. I do awesome live streams that are better than Daniel's and make him jealous. Anyway, so I have already seen in comment sections and threads where people heard Brandon make these comments and they kind of just went, no! It's not the Wheel of Time, it's something else. And my pushback there would be, well, almost every adaptation is going through exactly what Brandon is saying here. In fact, there are comments made right after this that Brandon said that I found to be really interesting from an author's perspective about a possible adaptation for one of his works. Let's go ahead and give that a listen. This is gonna be about a minute of me listening, so I'll try and make it funny, but just listen to what Brandon had to say. And I also encourage you to go and listen to this entire interview, because I am admittedly taking some of these things a little bit out of context because I need to shorten it for time. So go listen to the full interview. I don't think I'm doing disservice to anything he said, but it is well worth it over at the Dusty Wheel.
When I've been looking for my own adaptations, this is just kind of a personal philosophy. I'm not looking for someone who's going to film my book scene by scene. Working on my own adaptation now for Mistborn, the treatment, I basically had to throw out the whole book and start over with the same premise and build up the story again in a way that works for the movie medium. And that's when we finally got a treatment that works. And Rafe has kind of done that. He said, nothing is sacred. I'm throwing everything out and building up from the ground what would work to make a great television show that is inspired by the Wheel of Time. That's going to make some of you panic that it's more different than it is. It's not like, you still have all the main characters in the story, right? Right. It's still the story of the Dragon Reborn, and it's not going to deviate as much as I'm making it sound, but the characters are all seen through a different lens now. Yeah. And I think what Rafe is doing is consistent. It works to make a great story, and it still feels like the Wheel of Time to me, despite a couple of shifts and moves. And after the first episodes are out, we can talk about this in detail, right? Yeah. I don't want people to panic because I worry, like I'm saying, that they're going to think it's more different. But at the same time, I know hardcore Wheel of Time fans, right? I worked with hardcore Wheel of Time fans, and I have a feeling that a lot of them are watching this right now. Sure. And they are going to have some things they disagree with fundamentally about the adaptation.
Sure. So everything he just said there needs to be unpackaged a little bit. And I think his comparison to his adapting of Mistborn is extremely important to what is being discussed here. The art of adaptation for fantasy series is difficult. Inherently, some fantasy stories are going to be more difficult to translate to the screen than others. So the two that are being talked about here, Mistborn and the Wheel of Time, both apparently need to be shifted around, at least from the creators who are involved standpoint. So we have Rafe, who, from what Brandon is saying, is apparently fundamentally changing some early on elements of the story. And in contrast to that, we have Brandon Sanderson, the original author of Mistborn, saying, I'm having to do something kind of similar to adapt Mistborn as well. And that, I think, should be the message that really eases fears of fans here. Because one, we don't know entirely what he's referring to in these fundamental changes to the story early on. Like, maybe he's talking about all of a sudden Perine Barra is the Dragon Reborn, Landman Dragarin's a polar bear, and Aes Sedai channel flames out their butt. That might be what he's saying, but I really, really doubt it. That's not the kind of changes he's probably hinting towards. I wouldn't know. I haven't read the scripts like he has, but it's a safe bet. And to figure out maybe a more accurate idea, I think we need to look into why people who are involved with adapting fantasies to the screen change things like this. And in my opinion, the largest driving factor is obviously the transition of medium, specifically tackling pacing issues. So if you're reading a big, thick, chunker fantasy book, let's go grab one. Eye of the World, right here. If you are reading this, you control your own momentum through the story largely. If you're at a boring part, skim a little bit, who cares? If you're at a point where there's a lot of action, reread it and revel in it, all this stuff. The pacing and momentum of a story in the written medium is a lot more flexible than a TV show or a movie. Because in a TV show, you, the viewer, don't really control at what rate or how you're digesting what's being given to you. You sit your butt down and you focus, or you scroll through your phone and you're one of those people. If you are, that's fine. I just don't like watching TV with you. Then there's also time constraints that you don't have to deal with when writing. I mean, we see fantasy authors pen 1,000-page manuscripts left and right, but when you have a script for a TV show that's constricted to 45 minutes to an hour of runtime before they have to cut, that's heavily constraining. So if you all of a sudden are trying to do a scene for scene recreation of the Eye of the World, well, then your entire first season is going to be really hard to get through, in my opinion, because rereading that book, there would be 4 episodes in a row with not much action, just people kind of scrambling around, and while it's engaging to read because Robert Jordan's writing is inherently enjoyable enough to just process and be like, oh, character building, nice moments, again, television is entertainment in a whole other fashion. You need to have more action breaks. You need to have greater setting changes and things along these lines, which are going to pull in an audience which isn't entirely fantasy hardcore nerds. A lot of these might just be people who, you know, kind of just offhandedly are like, I want to pick up the Wheel of Time. And for this to be a successful show, period, we need that audience too. The Wheel of Time audience, unfortunately, is not large enough on itself, just the diehard fans who are sitting down day one to watch because it's the Wheel of Time, they are not enough to carry it through like Game of Thrones to the end. And the reason it was so successful so early on is because it rapidly blew past just the initial Song of Ice and Fire fans. And Wheel of Time has to capture that same hill. And kind of the ultimate proving of this point, though, when I'm talking about you do need to fundamentally restructure how a story, how a narrative progresses, is Brandon Sanderson saying he's having to do his own rebuilding for a Mistborn script to work. Mistborn, if you're gonna pick any fantasy story that's structured in a way that seems like it could just flop on over to a movie script and work, it seems like it would be Mistborn. But even there, he is saying, no, I'm having to really recreate it, not do a scene for scene adaptation, not do a page for page recreation, because that doesn't work. And so, yeah, I'm pretty forgiving from my perspective, hearing this as a Wheel of Time fan and going, yeah, things are going to need to change. Whether that's story beats early on so that certain plot lines can progress faster or wrap up quicker, or maybe even expounding upon certain plot elements so that a character who 6 books down the road is reintroduced is actually remembered by viewers and cared about. It's been heavily rumored and speculated that Logain's role is going to be amplified due to 1, Rafe Judkins saying he's a fan, and 2, the casting of Logain being a fairly well-known star. Some minor spoilers for the Wheel of Time, but this makes sense due to the fact that Logain, later on in the series, plays a pretty heavy role. If you read the books, you're able to be reminded of Logain repeatedly, offhanded conversations, little droplets here and there, just casually building him up. But in a Wheel of Time show, which is desperately trying to make up for time, they're dealing with constraints the books don't have to, a lot of those conversations have to be cut. So a way to make up for that is to upplay Logain's role at the beginning so that later on it can suddenly make a lot more sense how he's reintroduced, every fan's going to remember him and have a good impression of who he is. Again, I don't know if it's true that Logain's going to be here in a greater capacity. It's just something that the fan base is really heavily speculating upon, but it seems like a safe bet. So if I was writing the Wheel of Time, I was Rafe, I would take an element like that. Okay, I need to amp up this person's role so that this down the road makes sense, and then I would try and squeeze as many other plot lines into that amplifying of that character so that I can cover as much ground as possible while maintaining other integral elements of the early Wheel of Time story. Is suddenly Egwene going to be made the Dragon Reborn? I highly doubt it. Those are not the kind of fundamental changes that are being hinted at, and if that was the case, I would be furious and very much so agree with the naysayers who were saying this is not a Wheel of Time adaptation. It would be an unnecessary change. But I seriously doubt we'll be seeing many unnecessary changes. Instead, we will be seeing Rafe Judkins doing his best to interpret the Wheel of Time text to this new medium. And we know for a fact this showrunner has gone to extreme lengths to have people around him that are as knowledgeable in Wheel of Time as possible. Just go to my interview with Sarah Nakamura. She is a full-time, here are the facts from the pages that are not just my opinion, to Rafe at a moment's notice, just acting as a chronicler to make sure every little detail matches as closely as possible. A showrunner who's going to that great of an extent of effort to make sure he's accurate to the text as possible, I seriously doubt, based off of just my gut instinct seeing this, he is going to be making changes that are entirely unnecessary. Do not take this, though, as me saying the Wheel of Time show will be great, totally true to the text, and not deviate in any way that'll aggravate fans. It will. Inevitably. There are a million choices that have to be made for this show to be adapted. Some of them, they're gonna make the wrong call because it's impossible to make every call right. It's really just like a judgment call of which fans value what elements of the story to what extent. And so as certain calls are made that maybe break a little bit of the original text over here, that'll piss off fans there. If another call's made over here, it might make fans over here extremely happy. That's just a balancing act. Every adaptation's gone through this. People always point to the Lord of the Rings adaptation like it's some extremely true to the source material thing to prove, oh look, you don't need to change a whole lot. Are you dense? The Lord of the Rings movies are extremely different from the source material in very key ways when it comes to pacing and cutting unnecessary characters, or honestly, fundamentally changing some characters. The Aragorn in the Peter Jackson movies is extraordinarily different in terms of character from the Aragorn in the books, because that Aragorn in the books would not have translated to a modern audience in a way that would charm them, because he's much more, I want the crown, give it to me, it's mine, which kind of goes against what people were looking for in the early 2000s for their protagonist. I hope calls like that are made for the Wheel of Time. I really don't think many characters need to be changed to such a extreme extent, but if suddenly Rafe is thinking for Logain to make sense, I gotta play him up a little bit early on, all right, I'll trust his judgment call there. The guy's the experienced Hollywood showrunner, I'm not. Also, maybe we can cut down a little bit on the skirt smoothing, brain tugging, and sniffing. It's a judgment call. I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying it's a possibility. What do you think? What frustrates me the most is whenever I make these points that seem very obvious to me. Like, I'm making points here to me that I should be explaining to like a teenager at best. Like, this is simple stuff. Of course they need to make changes. Of course the material needs to be evolved for a new entire medium. I inevitably get comments of people calling me like a sellout shill who's just like an Amazon fanboy. One, I don't care about Amazon really at all. I'm just gonna put that out there. I have no allegiance to them aside from the fact that they can occasionally deliver me like a headset I need overnight. Why would I care about them? People think I'm on their payroll? No, my setup would not still be this if I was on Amazon's payroll. I've been wearing the same suit for over a year, damn it. I'm just an optimistic guy in general, and I've seen enough to think, yeah, this potentially has a good shot. It seems okay. I'm not totally down in the dumps about it, and I don't think anyone else really can be justifiably so. If you're one of these people who's that upset because people of color are involved, that's a whole other conversation for another video I'm working on in the future. But as of right now, these comments from Brandon don't show me anything I didn't already know, but I've certainly seen fans react in a way like he suddenly is confirming or like subliminally telling us the show's terrible. No, he's not. He's making a very obvious observation that remains true for even his book. And the fact that he is honest enough to tell us that I didn't particularly like one of the changes, but it's still the Wheel of Time and it's just something that I disagree about is nice. That means he's being very forward in a way he doesn't have to. But if you want to see people like Brandon suddenly shut up and feel like they can't say these honest interpretations of what's going on, keep doing what some fans are doing and just saying like, look, he's confirming it's bad. Because then he will go, well, I can't even give my honest opinion anymore because people are going to take it to an extreme. That's just not the case. That's just my thoughts on this. I would love to know your all's in the comments down below. Again, I feel like I'm explaining something that's very, very obvious. Like I'm annoyed that I have to continually hit these points, but also was excited when I saw Brandon finally hit them because people weight his opinion more than mine, obviously, as they should. So it just feels like I have a little bit more ammo in the clip now because I can go, yeah, even Brandon saying it's still the wheel of time, and the fact that decisions have to be made that'll be divisive is the inevitable result of adaptation. In summation, no, we're not going to agree with every decision Rafe makes. Period. But the sad truth is, we probably wouldn't agree with every decision Robert Jordan made if he was in charge of adapting it, because we all have different visions of these books. Everyone who has to transition mediums is going to make calls that are just a result of the restrictive nature of the new medium. And everyone weights the different values within the series at greater levels. Some people want an insane focus on the magic system, while others are like, no, put all the focus you can on character and nothing else. And then there's a whole other party that's like, action, nothing but action. So yeah, it's just gonna have these things, and it's gonna be the net result of whether or not these decisions are made with care or not. And we have had no information given to us so far to indicate which values are being weighted most carefully. Anyway guys, like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And have a good one, y'all. Peace.